By the end of this video, you would have set up your scene for grab interaction, wherein you'll be able to grab an object directly using the direct interactor or with the help of a ray and the ray interactor. So let's get started. Hey, it's Ashay from Immersive Insiders, and in this video, you're going to learn about grab interaction using the direct interactor and the ray interactor. Now, this video is a continuation from the previous one, wherein we learned to set up our Unity project with XR Interaction Toolkit, and we learned about the locomotion system. If you haven't checked that out already, then you should definitely do so over here. And if you already have, then that's really cool. We can get started. Alright, before we begin, you need to know that for an interaction to take place, you need an interactor and an interactable. Now, the interactor can be of direct type, wherein you directly take your controller and interact with an object, or you can make use of a ray interaction. So you will have a ray coming out of your interactor, and using that, you will be able to interact with objects. So let us start with direct interaction. So right now we have an XR origin here, which has the left hand controller and right hand controller. Now in the previous video, we had disabled the XR ray interactor from this, like you can see here, and that's because we wanted to use ray interactor for teleportation on the right hand controller. So if we want to add a direct interactor to this same left hand controller, we'll have to get rid of the XR ray interactor, and that's because for a given game object, you can either have a ray interactor or a direct interactor. You cannot have both. So let's go ahead and remove this component, and let's scroll down and click on add component, and let us add XR direct interactor. So we have added XR direct interactor. Now let me explain what this component does. So this component basically takes the interaction manager. Now like I said before, interaction manager is something that acts like a bridge between the interactor and the interactable. It kind of connects these two together. And then we have the interaction layer mask. So if you don't want the direct interactor to interact with some object which is of some particular layer, so if you don't want that to happen, then you can just uncheck that from here and it will no longer interact with that object. Next we have the attach transform. So say suppose we have our controller, right? So when you try and grab some object, the object gets attached to your controller. Now for some reason, if you want to adjust, so for example you have your hand model and the object just gets in the center, we don't want that. We want the object to get attached slightly ahead so that it looks and feels more natural. In such a case, we can add the attach transform, and creating that is really simple. All you need to do is right click on this, create an empty game object. We'll call it as attach transform, and let us scroll down and drag and drop this in here. That's it. So now all we have to do is position the attach transform. So right now it's at the center and it's not exactly at the same position as left controller. I think it's about 0.5 distance ahead. Now if we suppose had to create an interactable and try to grab it, even though you grab it here, the object will not be at your controller. It will be somewhere behind, like at a 0.5 distance. So let us move this in the Z direction by 0.5, and see now both of them are exactly in the same place. So now it'll get held exactly in the same location. So that's the use of attach transform, basically to move it to any place that you want it to move. All right, and then we have the select action trigger. So there are 4 states. Now the state and state change are the same. I couldn't find any difference, to be honest. So the state and state change works in this way. So if you have an object that you want to grab, you take your controller towards it and you press the grip button. So when you press the grip button, you have your object in your hand. You can move it, rotate it, and you can manipulate the object. Once you release the grip button, you'll no longer be able to interact with it because you're not holding it. So that's the idea behind state and state change. Now when it comes to toggle and sticky, so what these two does is, so if we have an object, you go and grab the object just by pressing it once. So once you press it, it's grabbed, so you don't have to keep pressing it. Even if you keep pressing it, doesn't matter. But if you release it, it does not get released. It will still be attached. You need to toggle it one more time for you to get released. So it's like you hold it, you manipulate, and then once you press it once again, it deselects the object. So that's what these two states does. So right now we'll keep it at select action trigger at state itself. So based on the state change, when you grab it, it's grabbed. When you release it, it gets released. And then we have keep selected target. So what this does is it kind of keeps the data of the interactable that you have worked with. So if there's a cube, you held it, you release it. Now it has the data that this is the last cube that I have. So if you want the data to be kept, so you can keep this checked. If you don't want the data to be there, so then you can just remove it. Now the reason why this there is because you can make use of events like was this last checked, or was what is this the object that was last grabbed, and other things like that. Then we have something called as hide control on select. So what this does is, if you have a hand object and for a hand prefab, and then you grab something, and if for some reason if the object is too small and your hand is too big, and you don't want your hand to be seen, so you can just enable this and it'll hide it once you grab an object. And then we have allow our activate. So when you enable this, the interactable, let's say suppose a cube are interactable, now that has an event which will get called when you hover over it. So if you want that event to be checked, so then you can enable this parameter as well. And finally we have something called a starting select interactor. So at the start of the game, if you want something to be already selected to your controller, already grabbed to your controller, then you can just drag and drop that object here, and when you hit play or when you start the game, that object is already here. But this will not work in state or state changed. It will work with toggle and sticky, because if you already have it in state or state changed, as soon as the game plays, it gets attached. But if you're not pressing this grip button, it gets released. So there's no point of having it actually. Alright, so we saw about the hand interactor, the direct interactor. Now, how will it know that I am trying to interact with something? There has to be some other way to do it, right? And that is by using a collider. So we need to add a collider to this. So let's add a spherical collider. There we go. And let us set its radius to 0.1, which is approximately the size of our hand. So we have, there we go. So that's perfect. Here you can see we have a collider. So when the collider goes and touches the interactable, it knows that, okay, there's something there and we can grab it. And that's it with interactor. Now let's create an interactable. So to do that, we'll start with the cube. Very simple. So let's create a cube and reduce its size to 0.2. We'll start with the origin and then let's take it slightly higher and forward, so that it can be easily grabbed. Now this has a box collider and we need a rigid body. Now each trigger enter will work only when you have rigid body. So let us go back to our hand interactor, and here we need to make sure that the each trigger is checked, or else again like two colliders will collide and the box will fly away. Whereas when the each trigger is checked, it'll just pass through. So make sure that each trigger is checked for your left hand controller, and then we'll go back to cube and we will disable gravity for now, and we'll add grab interactable component. There we go. It's called as XR grab interactable component. Now let's see what this component does. So first off, we have to assign it to the same interaction manager. Now here there's one more point that you need to remember. You just need to have one interaction manager in your scene. If there are multiple ones, then your interaction will not work. So make sure that there's just one interaction manager. So here it takes the interaction manager, and then here you have the interaction layer mask again. So if you have multiple interactors, like multiple controllers in different layers, and you want just one particular layer to interact with this cube, in such a case you can just remove those layers that you don't want it to interact with, and you'll no longer be able to interact with the layer. And then we have a collider. So for example, imagine that you have a gun prefab and your gun model has like 3-4 colliders, and you want to be able to grab only when you grab the handle. So in such a case, you can just take the handle collider, drag and drop it into this field, and this makes sure that only when you're grabbing the handle is when your gun gets grabbed. And then we have the selection mode. So here obviously there's just one mode, that's single mode. You cannot have multiple modes of selection. We have the moment type. So there are three types of there are three ways in which you can set this up. So the first one is velocity tracking. Now suppose you have a wall and then you have grabbed the cube, and if you try to pass through the wall, the cube will not go through. That is something that you want, then you need to choose velocity tracking. Now if you choose kinematic, then it will take into the mass and its angular velocity into consideration. So once you grab the cube, you can move your hand very quickly, but the cube will take some time to follow along. So that's kinematic. And instantaneous is, as it says, instantaneous. So as you move your hand, you rotate your hand, the grabbed object will move along as well. Then we have a parameter called as retain transform parent. So for some reason, if this cube was a child of some other game object, once you grab it, it generally unparents it. It comes back into the main hierarchy. And if you have this checked, then it will go back to its original parent. And if you don't have it checked, if you disable it, then the cube will be in the hierarchy itself, it will no longer be the child of the parent. Then we have the track position, we have the track rotation. So what this does is it tracks the position rotation. So once you grab it, if you have this unchecked like this, then no matter where you move your controller, the cube will still be there. It'll just follow the rotation of your controller. That's it. And it's the opposite for this one. So here it's like when you uncheck track rotation, and that time it will just follow the position and the rotation does not change. So right now we'll enable both of them so we can hold it, change its position and rotate them around as well. Then we have throw and detach. So throw and detach basically means if you're holding the cube and then you throw it, and that time the velocity of your controller gets imparted onto the cube. If you have this unchecked, then as soon as you leave it, it just falls down if gravity is enabled. If not, it just stays there, it does not move. So the velocity from your controller is not transferred to the object that you're holding. All right, and let's see, we have force gravity on detach. So if you don't, right now we have disabled gravity, right? And if you check this, so once you hold it and release it, gravity gets enabled automatically and the cube will fall down. That's what this parameter is for. And then again, the attach transform here is exactly the same as it was for the interactor. If you grab the cube and you don't want it to be grabbed at exactly at the same location, for some reason you want it to be somewhere else, in such a case, you can go ahead and create a new game object, drag and drop it here and adjust the position of that game object, and your cube will go and get attached at that point. Perfect. And this also has like interactable events which you can make use of. For example, the first hover entered, the last hover entered, then when it is hover entered, hover exited. So this is very useful when you want to show. So suppose you have a controller and you hover enter inside the cube, you can change its color and material. It's like a visual clue to show that, okay, I'm trying to interact with it. And yeah, that's it. So there's one more thing that we need to do. So right now, if we check our left hand controller on the XR controller component, if I scroll down, here there's something called as model prefab. So at this particular stage, if I hit play and show it to you, I will not be able to see my left hand because there's no model at all. So for now, we just create a small sphere. So for that, we'll right click 3D object sphere and we'll call this as hand. We'll reduce its size to 0.1. Maybe it's too small. We'll make it as 0.2. And then we'll drag and drop this into our project, project folder to make it into a prefab. And let's get rid of it from here. Then we'll select the left hand controller. Let us scroll down and let us drag and drop this here, prefab, model prefab. Now we can save the scene and let us test it out. Now before testing, there are a few changes that we'll have to make. Now if I select the left hand controller and if you scroll all the way down, here you can see that our spherical collider has the center at Z0.5, which means that it's not at the origin. So if you try to grab, the collider will not be actually colliding with it, so it will not work. So we'll set it to 0 so that it's exactly at the center of our controller. And then if we check our attach transform, now this has a Z value of 0.5 as well, which we earlier gave it like to match it, but it has to be 0 so that it's at the origin as well. Now the last change that we'll have to make is on the hand prefab. So if we select the hand prefab, when we created it initially, it had such position, but this has to be 0 so that again this starts exactly where we have the left hand controller, or else the cube will take the position that's there from the left hand controller. So it'll take this as the origin, and whatever position you give here, the sphere will be placed at that exact position. And this sphere also has a spherical collider, which we don't want. So if you have this enabled, what will happen is we have the sphere, we have the cube. If you try to grab the cube, you'll never be able to, and it's because the sphere will keep pushing the cube forward. So let us go ahead and disable this, or you can go ahead and remove the component as whole. So with that, we have set up our scene. Now we can save it and test it out. Now before we test it out, you need to make sure that your device is connected to your machine. I'm using Airlink. Now if you're not sure how that's done, then you should definitely check out this video wherein I'll show you how to connect your device wirelessly to play Unity scene. Alright, so now we can press play and test it out. I'll move my scene view here like this so that it can be clearly seen for you guys. Alright, and yeah, so my hand controller is not seen, so let's check out why. We'll exit the play mode and let's select here, scroll down. Right, so the model prefab has not been attached. I'm not sure why. I thought we did it already. Let us go ahead and add it, and now let's hit play. Perfect. So here is my left hand. You can see the sphere, and here's my right hand. We have the teleportation still active. And let me grab this right now. So here you go. You can see that I've grabbed the object, and there you go. It snaps into the exact center. So even if I'm colliding little in here and grab it, it gets snapped into exact center position. So with that, we know that our direct hand interaction is working perfectly fine. Next, we'll see how to interact with the object using ray interaction. Alright, so for the ray interaction, there isn't anything much that we had to do, and that's because if we check the right hand controller, it already has a ray interactor here. So let me quickly explain what this does. So ray interactor is exactly the same thing that we use for teleportation. It can be used for both, either teleportation or you can use it to grab other objects as well. So here we have options like force grab. So force grab is like when you grab it, the cube comes and attaches exactly at the center. So say imagine the cube is at some distance and you use the ray interaction to interact with it. And if you want it to stay in its exact same position, then you need to disable this. And if you want it to come and attach it to your hand, then you can leave this enabled. Now I'll show you both the cases when we are testing it. And then we have the option of anchor control. So what anchor control does is, on the right controller we have this joystick, right? So once you interact using the ray, you can use this joystick to move its position and rotate it around and push it forward back as well. Now that's done with the help of ray controller. You can disable it if you don't want that to happen. So again, while testing, I'll show this as well. And then we have the attached transform. It's exactly the same as the other attached transform. And then we can give the ray origin transform. So if you don't want the ray to origin from your controller, some other place for some any reason that you might have, you can create attached transform and add that here as well. All right, so that's about ray interaction. So we don't have to again add different kind of interactable for this. All it needs is the same component, that is XR grab interactable. That's it. So let us save the scene and test it out. There we go. So here you can see that I'm able to interact with the cube. Now if I press the grip button, it just gets attached to my hand here. And then now with the help of joystick, I can rotate it like this. And here you're seeing that I'm rotating in my environment as well. And that's because I have snap turn, component attached to my right hand controller. So this is exactly reason why if you want you can disable the anchor controls. So now if I select my right hand controller and go to the XR ray interactor, and if I uncheck anchor control and if I uncheck force grab, both of them, and now we'll see how it will work. So let me go back. So here's my cube. Now if I grab it, you see it's exactly at that same position. It's not coming back to the origin. And I can no longer use my thumbstick or the joystick to manipulate the object that I've grabbed, but instead I'll be able to just snap turn. That's it. So I can't move forward or back or any of those. All right, perfect. So let us exit the play mode. So with that, you have learned about ray interaction as well. By the way, we have a free ebook linked in the description which talks about the biggest mistakes you could make as an aspiring XR developer. Now this will give you a huge advantage over others, so you should definitely check it out. Alright, with that you have learned about grab interaction using the direct hand interactor and the ray interactor. Now if you want to learn more about the hand prefabs and how to animate them while grabbing, then you should definitely check out our Immersive Insiders page. I will leave a link for it in the description. And if you're curious to know how to start your VR development using the Oculus Integration SDK, then you should check out this video over here. If you have any questions, then do let us know in the comments below. If you feel that this video has helped you, then I'd highly appreciate it if you can like and leave a subscribe. And as always, I will see you in the next one.